Hi, everyone. Tim Klein here with my co-author, Dr. Bell Liang. We're the authors of the new book, How to Navigate Life, the New Science of Finding Your Way in School, Career, and Life. And we're launching the book by talking to some of our favorite experts in the field of education and mental health. And I'll let Bell talk about our very, very special guest today.
Well, we are so thrilled to have here Dr. B. Janet Hibbs, and she's a recognized authority on family issues and all things higher ed, mental health, and just helping students really navigate these very stressed years of life. She's dually licensed as a psychologist and family therapist, and she holds the highest credential in the marriage and family therapy field as an approved supervisor for the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. She's also the recipient of PPA Psychology in the Media Award for 2021, and she considers her most important credential as that of mom. So some years ago, following her son's recovery from depression while in college, she and her co-author, Dr. Anthony Rostain, wrote The Stressed Years of Their Lives, a guide for parents of high school and college students who want to help support their kids' mental health. She's also the author of Try to See It My Way, Being Fair in Love and Marriage, and she's a co-author with Dr. Rostain on a forthcoming book about parenting young adult relationships. So we really have, an expert here, a best-selling author, and we're just thrilled to be able to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us, B.
It's truly my pleasure, and as it was my true reading pleasure to read How to Navigate a Life, I thought the two of you just had incredible insights, and they were all backed by here's what the research and the science says, but in a super reader friendly way. So
thank you so much.
Hooray! Congratulations on your book.
Thank you.
We're thrilled. Really appreciate that. Super encouraging.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe we could just start off by talking a little bit about, some of your findings in your the book, The Stressed Years, because I think that topic really overlaps quite a bit with the research and writing that we've done, and you took a deep dive into the mental health struggles that young people have as they navigate these years, and really some of the ways that parents and mentors, counseling folks can help to support young people during those years. So I was wondering if you could just share a little bit about some of the major findings, maybe some of the most surprising findings, that you had from that work.
I would say that one of the most surprising findings is what's happening to parents of these kids, because many of us, including myself, we kind of thought childhood was going to roll out for them like it rolled out for us. Of course, that was a long time ago for me, but it's still, what we think of as normal, we expect to just continue. It's as if it's some continuous stream. But every developmental transition is stressful. It's stressful for the child going through it, the adolescent going through it, the young adult, and it's very stressful for the parents. And so one of the things that we found, even though there's so much talk about youth mental health, for a good reason, it's really had astronomical explosion of mental health problems among younger and younger kids. So the stress keeps getting worse as we get younger even. But also the mental health of parents is not doing well. Parents are not doing well. And so part of what we wanted to do in our book, and I think it really dovetails so nicely with what the two of you talk about, which is who are the anchors, the psychologically safe places for a child or a young adolescent or an adult? Because one of the things that we're finding as we continue on with the next book is that parents, surprise, you're not done when you send your kid to college or when you send your kid to their first job. It's they still are struggling, as the two of you point out, for the reasons of kind of a performance mindset. They're still struggling with trying to make it. And, and I'd really love to hear your own, thoughts and observations in the research about how do you help both parents and kids kind of move out of this zero-sum game, because that's why the stress, which, as you said, is quite inevitable. It's not so much that stress is bad, it's when demands exceed ability, and also when our anxiety, when operating from a place of fear, begins to take over, our kind of naturally competitive selves. And then we think it's, that fosters this performance mindset that the two of you talk about. So I'd love to hear from you too.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, I think you bring up an amazing point. And I think about when, like, the reason that Belle and I decided to write the book in the first place was, we saw all these students who were really, really struggling. I mean, we were working with these students at BC, and they had double majors and they had minors and they had everything figured out. And it
Yeah.
was like, but then when you just digged a little bit beneath the surface, it was like they were terrified about the future. They were super uncertain about the decisions that they were making. And we came to discover that they had never been taught how to decide what to do, how to make these decisions. And I think we found, to your point, the parents have never been taught how to be a guide alongside their students either. No one ever tells you how to help your kid make the decisions either. And we start out the book kind of really empathizing with parents, being like, a lot of parenting today is being dictated by fear, uncertainty, and doubt, because we live in this world where it feels incredibly difficult. It feels like if your student is not the best in their class, if they're not going to the very quote unquote best college, that they might not make it in the world. They might not find a job where they can pay the bills and find affordable housing. And so we really kind of just try to paint the picture of what happens when you have these good intentions, they're warped by fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and how you can unintentionally send these messages around performance about what's
Right.
important that's getting it with the students. So yeah, it really is speaking to that. I have more I could, but Belle, I'm curious your thoughts on it. Or
Yeah, along those lines, like one of the things that I love about your work is that you take such a compassionate view. You're a therapist, you work with families who are struggling, you're a parent yourself. And that's something that we really resonate with, is that, our book
Mhm.
really is about coming alongside parents who are doing the
Mhm.
best that they can. They're
Mhm.
looking at the situation, of the world as it is, with an ongoing pandemic and with multiple social, like, reasons for social unrest. And they see their child flailing. And so, of course, they have, it's very easy to go to that sort of threat scarcity mindset, because there's a reality to what they're seeing. And I think that it's important that we acknowledge that, parents, they're not disconnected from the reality of, the fact that young people are struggling, and they're doing the best
Really?
that they can to come alongside them. But I very
Yeah.
much agree with Tim, that our book is about really helping parents to look at what the research says, that there are some things that we are trying so hard to do to help our young people that are actually, not only stressing us out as parents. Tim and I are both parents as well. We're stressed about trying to help them to achieve at the highest levels. We're also stressed about trying to make happiness the goal. That we should try to remove all unhappiness from our children's lives. That we should, make sure that they have no negative emotion, that they should just be happy all the time. And both of those things, achieving at the highest levels and being happy all the time, are just not realistic, and they're not necessarily necessary for health and success in life. And so what we want to do is to really bring attention to research that I think will relieve parents from that very, very heavy burden that they've been carrying. Um,
Yes. I that was one of the things that was so appealing about your book, because sadly in the mental health field, many times parents are blamed, and all you have to do is like look at the negative stereotyping that's going on: helicopter parents, snowflake, excellent sheep kids, to have a kind of like, well, whose fault is this? And it's kind of like, oh, hello, it's no one's fault. It's just a response, and it's not even a neurotic response. It's a realistic response, as you're saying, to the conditions, the existing conditions, and then just really tsunami of like uncertainty and anxiety and what's going to happen next. And I think one of the things that will help parents as well as kids is like, we don't know the future. If the last 2 years have taught us anything, it's like, we don't know the future. And so pretending that if you do this or if you do that, then you'll have a good life. It's like, all right, you can stack the deck a little bit, but, and make reasonable choices. But one of the things that I think the two of you do so well is you say, well, how do you decide? What are the principles for deciding the things that help us withstand failures and disappointments? Because to your point, Bill, about, be happy, it's unrealistic. It's okay to have, it's like we have a range of feelings. We should allow our children to express a range of feelings and not try to bright side it or not try to go poo poo because the realities, kids are very, very savvy to one, not only, even if their parents don't like talk that much about like their view of the world, it's all around them. Social media bombards kids these days. And social media is kind of a rich get richer, the poor get poorer phenomenon that we're seeing in the social comparison worlds. So I think you all did a great job in terms of talking about like that comparison mindset, and also really helping, as I said, aligning with parents about, okay, here's how to help guide your kids. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that and really appreciate that affirmation. I think that that's so true what you said about, there's this expectation that if you follow the recipe, you follow the step-by-step instructions of how to make your child the most successful, happy human, that should be the outcome. And there's a lot of, I think, disillusionment oftentimes for parents when they did everything that they could, even though they weren't perfect, but they did a lot, and still the result is that they see their child not going in that straight line. And in our book we really are trying to make it clear that the research suggests, and so does history, that we're no longer in a world where young people move into their careers in a straight line, that in fact it is much more of a zigzaggy adventure, and that's not a bad thing. That's exactly where the growth comes from. And we want to just relieve parents from some of the anxiety of when they see their children doing some of the things that they view as wrong turns. We think of them more as like scenic routes. That really is where a lot of the growth happens. And when we think about all of our lives, Tim certainly has a great story for it. That was true for us. That it was not necessarily a straight line, the academic life and the career life. Some of the most I think disappointing moments, or the moments that we might have viewed as failures in our academic years or in our careers, were pivotal to our growth and provided opportunity. So that's this kind of a shift from a threat or scarcity mindset to more of an abundance mindset. Like, what can come of this? What can grow and be gained from this scenic route that your young person is taking, or this unexpected turn? And so I love, really one of the emphases in your book where you talk about learning to fail and being okay. This is such a hard thing for parents, this idea that, we should try to protect our child from anything negative, bad, smelling of failure. But I'd love for you just to share a little bit more about what you mean by that when you talk about learning to fail and being okay with that. How do you help parents to develop that sense of perspective?
I mean, Tony and I talk, our mantra is life is not linear, the scenic route, as you're saying. But I also think that one of the harder things to do as a parent is to manage one's own anxiety and reactivity. And so, of course, you're going to have feelings, and of course, you're going to have fears, because, parenting today, especially, early on now begins in this, like, what's the metric for normal? And people begin even prenatally to going like, and what size is the fetus? And what, it's like this incredibly detailed search for, is my child okay? And so people also do their own comparisons among, and in the world, there's going to be some kids who excel at one thing and your child doesn't. And yet you need to reassure yourself you didn't excel at everything. In a way, it's kind of like remind yourself, normalize this for yourself. Didn't you ever fail? Didn't you ever get fired from a job? Didn't you ever kind of go down, for me in my own graduate education, I started off as a clinical psychologist, and I decided, it doesn't exactly fit, but I did it for a few years. And then I kind of stumbled on family therapy in its infancy. And that was it. That was kind of an awakening, like, oh, this is what I really want to do. So to your points, Tim and Belle, about like, how do you find that kind of mindset, that purpose-driven mindset that both has an extrinsic, okay, do good in this way for the world, but hey, it's personally meaningful to me. That's what your child, and that's what parents should help their child find. Like, okay, that didn't do it for you. Like, and some parents make the mistake of saying, you're really good in math, or you got all A's and and therefore you should go for this for major. And I'm thinking, who at 17 knows what they want to do?
Right.
So the notion is, whatever someone's good at or whatever someone's interested in still may not marry those two, kind of passion and outcome and personal meaning, and reach longer term goals as a it's a long game.
Exactly.
Parenting is a long game, yeah, it's a long
Can
game.
I ask a question? I mean, and then but like when you were first starting doing clinical therapy, like, how did you become aware that it wasn't for you? Were you aware in the moment, and were you able to like know in the moment, like what the thing was that wasn't working, so you could pivot to more family and couples therapy?
Well, at that time, the only route really in psychology, now we're talking about before the advent of family therapy. So I was in one of the few kind of opening family therapy programs in the country back when, which was in the late 70s.
Cool.
But before that, I was a clinical psych person. How did I know? At that time, I don't think this is really true anymore, but at that time, clinical psychology was very pathology oriented. Mm-hmm. It was very like, who's the problem? And I thought, this feels bad. That we're all kind of the problem. Why am I just diagnosing people all the time? Which is part of what I was doing early on, is like giving, a lot of different testing and diagnosing, and it paid the bills, but it was not at all gratifying, because it was just kind of like what I would call like a naming intervention that it didn't help people. It's like, oh, great, now I have a label. So anyhow, as I said, the field has vastly moved on from there. But at that point in time, it was still kind of rebounding from World War II and all of the trauma that had been seen in the culture, and was kind of intergenerational at that point. So I'm not blaming the field, but I'm just saying in that moment in time, it had not evolved to me to do something that was meaningful with it.
Yeah, I think thank you. And thank you for sharing that, because that's a great example. Because I do think, that life is not linear. I think when we were writing this book, we realized that like subconsciously, we have these educational systems that like we reinforce the idea of a linear path through we looked at all the language in education, like you're on track. We have pathway programs. You're going to drop out. We have all of these metaphors of language that infers you need to be on this path. And so, when Belle and I were talking about it, it was like, well, if life is a path, what happens if you're not on a path? You're lost, right? And then if you try to verge somewhere else, you're like falling behind, or it's this race. And so that's where we're really trying to shift this idea of like what you said, stop looking at it like this is path. Because I mean, if anything, the last 2 years have told us, if there were paths to begin with, they're all gone now.
Yes.
And it's more about like being able to listen for what calls you, right? And being able to like, it's so funny because you just felt, you could feel it, right? You were like, this doesn't feel good. And that was a
Yeah.
signal that you were using. And it just
Yep.
feels like in this era of the internet where like in parenting, you know, I have a 6 and a 3-year-old, and you go on the internet and like everyone's telling you what you should be doing. Like the quote
That's
unquote right way to parent is correct. And so I think it causes people to like not rely on their own internal intuition telling
Right.
them what's right for them. And so
Right.
I feel like that's, after this long, it's like that's kind of what our book is about. It's like, you know, like teach you and your kids to listen to what moves you and like meet them where they're at and have them do the thing. And like, not only is that like a much more gratifying way to parent or teach or coach, it's also the smart thing to do for the kid. Like that is the thing that's going to actually make them happier and successful. So it's like, but like we had to work so hard to just be like, you already have the answers and we're just empowering you. Like, just be a good person and like go alongside your kid and you're going to be okay. But it's so hard in the society we live in to actually like believe that that's true. So
It is
I think it's
very,
a really
very
counter.
hard. Go ahead, Belle. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was just going to add that it's a very countercultural message because
Yes.
I think especially for parents who, you know, are very dialed into their kids' lives. You know, myself have a recently graduated, you know, recent college graduate and a soon to be college student who is going to be in his senior year right now. So I understand very much the, you know, the sense of anxiety around the future. And so we very easily go to we have the resources to protect our child. We have the knowledge, we have the experiences, we
All
have,
right.
you know, we've gained it if we didn't have it before.
Right.
And so we want to be able to give our children all these resources. And so the countercultural message of how to navigate life really is that this is about drawing out the creative energy and confidence of your child. And we want to not just stop there at, you know, saying that like it's like some easy thing to do, but really provide some
Right.
specific practical ways of developing a relationship with your child that
Mhm.
is going to elicit that kind of confidence and agency. There are
Yes.
ways that we can be speaking to our child, where there's ways
Mhm.
that we can be, you know, in conversation with them that create connection and authenticity and warmth, and are not closing your eyes on the kinds of challenges that your child might encounter, but it's having a little bit of you know, even just increased faith that part of the process is a windy one, and that we're not going to just immediately jump in if we feel that they can do it themselves, if we feel that they can find their way with some scaffolding. So we want to just
Yes.
we're trying to be very practical about giving some handholds to parents as well. And I know that you do that, you know, through the stressed years. You talk a lot about specifically cultivating peer relationships. And I wonder
Mhm.
if in our last couple of minutes here, if you can just, you know, give us a quick, you know, take home message about how to cultivate peer relationships.
Peer relationships are increasingly important to children, especially US children, in their adolescent and then in college. In fact, one of the reasons that students continue in college, assuming they have the financial resources, is a sense of belonging. And so, how do we belong? Part of what everyone looks for, whether it's in school or whether it's in workplace or life, really, is what's called an affinity group. And it's like there are people, there are tribe, and part of it is they share our interest, or we get along, we have fun with them. And so part of allowing parents to foster that, because sometimes it's counterintuitive to parents. I'll give a quick example. My older son loved Dungeons and Dragons before, and I'd never heard of it. It was like, what's D&D? D&D, what's that? And then he invited all these friends over from high school to play it with him. And they formed this incredibly cohesive group. They would just laugh it up. It was just hysterical to be in like the kitchen listening to them. And what I learned was that I didn't have to know what it was or
Right.
what they were enjoying, as much as like they'd found each other and doing something that everyone enjoyed. And so part of how do you find your peer group is, it's certainly not through selfies, and it's not through like how many follows do you get. I mean, that is a really much a, that's such a downer for kids. Like, oh, I have to edit like my, you know, my feed now because I didn't get enough follows. It's like, ah. So it's really more real time to the extent that we can get it. And it's also fostering for kids, but also for parents. Like, how does this feel to you? So one of the things, most important things I learned, you know, going back to kids who are going into college, is if you're going to take them around on a tour of different campuses, pay really close attention. Because when my kids would tell me things like, oh, they don't really dress like I do, or oh, they're wearing too much makeup, I would like go, that's so superficial. I mean, that was my thought bubble. I didn't say it. But later I learned, oh my God, they're so right. They're looking for kids. They have a sixth sense about like, who are they going to connect with? And I think we all do. It takes a very brief time to really feel like a simpatico with somebody or not. And usually that, so it's like, introduce your kids to a range of interests, introduce your, you know, let yourself explore, let yourself develop, as the two of you talk about, the social capital of like, you know, not networking in the formal short term, can I get a job, but like building a relationship, because that's what's going to get you through your life, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's funny. It's like the science backs up everything that you're saying there, right? Because it's like, I mean, that Dungeons and Dragons example, that's what we would call, you know, they had this shared positive, it was a shared experience dominated by positive emotions, which builds sense of
Right.
belonging. And then,
Yeah.
but then what's interesting in our book, it's like, how do you take Dungeons and Dragons and then how do you tease out the things about Dungeons and Dragons that they love so much? And like, we're pretty confident that when people use our book, you know, is it you get to be super creative? Is it problem solving? Is it critical thinking? Is that what
Yeah.
you really love about Dungeons and Dragons? Which I know there's a ton of it in that. Guess
Yeah.
what? Those are the same skills that are most in demand in the labor force when you grow up. Or is it like the working with other people, communication, collaboration, consensus building? Guess what? So, you know, like those are the things we need to thrive in life. So it's like, again, great job of meeting people where they are. And just another thing that really spoke to me was like, you know, I used to be a school counselor working with people. How do you choose college? And what the number one factor for students is when you're going on those college tours, a student will say, I can see myself here, or I can't see myself here. And really
Right.
what they're doing is like the easier it is to envision themselves connecting with people on campus, they're
Yeah.
like, this feels like the highest probability that I'm going to feel like I belong here. So even though
Exactly.
that right? So even though that might feel a little silly, it's like it's actually grounded in very wise science there. So I really appreciate you
Great.
sharing that. Go ahead, Belle. You had an
It
idea.
seems
Oh,
like,
there
you
you go.
know, the take home message, and we're coming to the end of our time. This has been wonderful, is that our children, our young people, they know a lot more than we give them credit
Yes,
for.
they do.
And, you know, it
Mm-hmm.
is recognizing as a parent or a mentor, a person coming alongside a young person, what they're capable of and inspiring them to be their best self. You know, young people rise and fall to the expectations that we have of them, that we, you know, as we like to say. And that's really not just a nice saying. There's a lot of research that backs that. And so how is it so different for a young person when they sense that their parent, their mentor, you know, really believes in them and really is interested in what they think and have to say, how they would make a decision, you know, and there are ways that we can come alongside them to help them to learn to trust themselves to make the best decisions. So thank you so much for taking the time today to share your work and research, and best wishes to you in your next
Thank you.
writing project. And we'll be looking forward to reading that book in the spring.
It's been a pleasure being here with you today, and thank you for allowing me the privilege, really, of being an early reader of your book. I highly recommend it, and I think it will be helpful to parents at whatever stage of parenting they're at. Yeah, it's great.
Thank you so much, B.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Bye, everyone.
Take good care.